Hi guys, and welcome to week 3 of this Pleiadian contact course. I, of course, am Ray Ray. Anita is no longer available to do the rest of the course, although her meditations will still be part of week 3 and 4 as well. Okay, she's just a little busy with her own stuff, so I'm just going to get this course done and dusted now. So this week is all about contact protocols and exploring the various ways in which, extraterrestrial beings can make contact with humanity, because there isn't just one way to have contact with ET beings. There are countless ways that contact can occur, and it actually occurs on subtle levels in ways that you don't even realize. A lot of you are actually being contacted with and nudged and guided by, other interstellar versions of your own selves without you even realizing it. So today we're going to really, touch on the way some contact can occur. We're also going to be touching on some of the policies that are really important when it comes to the Interstellar Alliance and the Galactic Councils, which, oversee the project of really preparing a civilization that is ready to be introduced to the galactic family. So we're going to be exploring all that as well. Now, I'm sure many of you have seen Star Trek before, okay? A lot of the things that are prevalent within that show are actually real, okay? Truth is actually stranger than fiction, believe it or not. So, for example, the policy of the Prime Directive in Star Trek, the non-interference policies of advanced civilizations to really allow, lesser evolved, lesser developed civilizations to develop on their own is a very real thing. However, human beings have reached a point in their evolution where their technological advancements kind of outweigh their spiritual developments. And when this happens, then that is a big red flag to some of the beings in the galactic communities because they're like, okay, these people have the capacity to destroy themselves, you know, and they're not really united. They don't really have the capacity fully to truly put all of their differences aside, and they're kind of on the brink of destruction. So when that occurs, obviously, some kind of intervention does occur, but it happens in a very subtle way. They can't exactly just come as, land on the White House lawn, for example, because it would send everybody into complete panic. Okay, so it has to happen in very subtle ways. Really, the goal of these subtle ways of interfering with a civilization that is on the verge of potentially destroying itself, is to expand the civilization's consciousness, which will in turn create more unity and harmony within that collective. That is what they are hoping to do with us. They have slowly been preparing us for their arrival. They've been watching us since time immemorial in very subtle ways, but they are making their presence known now. More and more of their sightings are, being reported, even by, some sources that you never think would actually report them. Nowadays, it's becoming commonplace simply because the reality of this is becoming such a prevalent thought in mainstream thinking that there's just no denying it anymore. But still, a lot of people, and especially like religious people, would really struggle with the experience of, having that kind of contact occur. A lot of people simply still are not ready. Okay. A forced intervention doesn't really help anybody to evolve at the end of the day. Civilizations have to evolve of their own accord. Civilizations have to express and become their own unique extension of consciousness. It would make no sense for an advanced race just to come down and completely create us in their image, make us copy everything they do, their ways of thinking, everything. Humanity has its own unique expression and its own unique expressions of the truth in the spiritual path, religions, and everything that exists on our planet. These are all unique to the earth. These are all divine expressions of human consciousness, the human psyche as a whole. Okay. Of course, there's been some, kind of inspiration in the past from some events that have happened throughout humanity's history where, extraterrestrial beings have intervened and, we've mistaken that as like gods. That has happened in the past for sure in our history. Okay. But now we're realizing that, collectively that we are as much as a wave on the cosmic sea as they are. We don't really need to bow down to these beings just because they're more spiritually advanced than us or more technologically advanced. The real divine extraterrestrial beings never wanted that in the first place. You know, they really just want us to expand our consciousness and to really join them in a state of harmony and unity together. Okay, that's really the goal there. But non-interference is so important because, civilizations have to learn how to grow on their own. So the Interstellar Alliance and other galactic councils do have like a sort of measure like the Prime Directive put in place for sure that really can't be overridden unless a civilization such as ours, develops their technological capabilities to a point where it outweighs their spiritual understanding and spiritual awareness. So there are a lot of spiritually advanced people on the earth for sure, not denying that. And there is a process of ascension and the collective consciousness is expanding on this planet at the moment for sure. But at the end of the day, if you were to be an ETB, just observe from the outside in, you would still see war everywhere. You would see famine. You would see starvation in many third world countries. You would see so much religious oppression. You would see so much division when it comes to race, gender, sexuality, religious beliefs. We are still an extremely segregated society. And that is very dangerous when, you know, we reach a certain level in our technological capabilities and we're still behaving in these ways to one another. We still have all of these differences. It's a very dangerous place because it puts us on the brink of our own self-destruction. And there have been many civilizations that have come and gone before us that have, destroyed themselves, not only just on the Earth, but also on Mars too. So but the Interstellar Alliance have assured us that that will not be allowed to happen. A full-scale nuclear war will not occur. It's not allowed to happen. The Earth is too precious. There's too much life on it. There's too many resources. We this Earth has the potential to be a literal Eden, okay, brimming with life and such variety and such beauty, but unfortunately, we take that for granted. And this is something that really upsets those who are a part of the Interstellar Alliance. They don't want to see us bickering over one another over such surface level differences. They want us to attune to that cosmic commonality that we have with each other and to really realize that yes, we are all one at our core. That is it. So when a race does have the capabilities to leave its own world, but it still harbors, destructive tendencies, okay, then it really becomes confined to its own star system. There isn't really any like sentient life living anywhere else in our solar system right now. There may be some microbial life on Mars, or there may even be some beings on Mars. I'm not entirely sure, like underground, but there isn't really anywhere we can go and conquer, for example. We are a very aggressive and hostile race. That is how we are perceived by many races in the Interstellar Alliance. We are judged by the way we treat each other and behave towards one another. And the thinking in the councils is, if they're willing to do that to one another, what will they be willing to do to beings that look nothing like them, that are completely different? There are different racial groups on our planet that are killing each other just because we've got different colored skin. Imagine beings who look completely different to us, look nothing like us. How would we treat them? That is the general thinking. Obviously, they know that you can't judge every individual within the collective by that. There are some good apples among a bad bunch sometimes, yeah. And that's they understand that, and they are reaching out to people who are of a higher level of consciousness to try and, bring about and foster more peace and unity within our collective consciousness. But humanity has been put on a cosmic quarantine. We are not allowed to leave the solar system. We're simply not allowed. There are some people who have been part of some kind of like secret space program in the past, and they're being told that they have to stay within the boundaries of their own solar system. They're not allowed to go beyond Pluto, and that is because we're not really ready to truly interact in a peaceful and harmonious way towards other races fully yet. Again, there are some people who are ready individually, but again, they judge us as a collective as well. And our collective consciousness right now, in its present state of consciousness, is still very, very, very primitive. We do act like tribal monkeys in some way still, and we do need to evolve and to grow before we can truly, become fully fledged members of the Interstellar Alliance. We have to be willing to put all weapons down. We have to join hands and again really focus on that cosmic commonality that we have with one another and also our extraterrestrial brothers and sisters as well. Everyone and everything is consciousness. That is it. We are all one. It doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter what you like, what you don't like. It doesn't matter what you believe in. It doesn't matter where you come from, where you were born. Nothing. It doesn't matter what your passport is. Nothing matters. Ultimately, these are just surface level differences that really don't matter much to those of a higher level of consciousness because they exist in a state of harmony, oneness, and wholeness. So really, it's really important to understand why we've been put on this quarantine. It's simply because if we're a danger to ourselves and each other, then we're also going to be a danger potentially to some of the other races out there who live in peace and harmony. If we were given the freedom to just go out and fly to any other star system, we probably want to seize it and conquer it for its, diamonds or whatever else we could find on their planets. If we were to stumble across a completely harmonious and benevolent civilization that simply has no concept of war. They don't have any weapons on their planet. They're simply living in a loving and harmonious way, one with nature. But the planet itself was just full of valuable resources. There is no doubt in my mind that there would be some individuals involved in the space program to try and seize those minerals from the planet that we would visit. And that pains me to say, but there are a lot of people who are still very greedy. There's a lot of like racism and alienism still in humanity's consciousness as well. So we have to just be realistic here, okay? As a civilization, we have to be a bit realistic. We have to meet ourselves where we are, okay? And where we are right now is a segregated race. Again, just because the whole, like most of the world is like this doesn't necessarily mean you who is watching this is like this. And this is why you are watching this because, you are of a higher level of consciousness. I have got no doubt about that. You are of a higher level of consciousness and, you are loving and have peaceful intentions and you have the intention of becoming more of a clear channel for the source and everything like that, which is wonderful, So again, this is why these beings are coming to certain individuals in our world who are ready for this information, who are ready to disseminate this information to the rest of the world. We have to prepare humanity for the arrival of our cosmic brothers and sisters before these quarantines can be truly lifted. Now, it's common knowledge nowadays that, some governments have exchanged extraterrestrial technology with, some beings, most noticeably the Greys, okay, have came in. And now, before we go further, it's important to understand what the Greys actually are, because they're not really extraterrestrial like many think. They're not from a different planet per se, okay? They're from a different timeline. And they're from the future. They're actually mutated future human beings who have come back in time because they valued technological advancements over their own biology, over nature, over their connection to nature. And as a result of that, they messed up their genes and genetics to the point where they lost the ability to completely procreate. So they had to tunnel back through time where some raw human DNA still existed, realities such as ours. And, they gave the United States government, for example, they gave them certain pieces of technology. One example of that is fiber optic technology. That is from extraterrestrial sources. Okay. They gave us that technology so that we would actually give them permission to abduct people to take their genetic DNA to create hybrid children, and I've actually met my hybrid child before. Okay, so I know that these beings do exist as well. And again, they're not really extraterrestrial like, because they're still human beings. They're just for the future and they've kind of mutated themselves. So even the hybrids are not extraterrestrials either. Okay. Technological exchange, though, is usually frowned upon by the galactic communities and those who are in charge for sure. It's not really a good thing to do. And the Greys, kind of did this, behind the backs of those who were observing from the Interstellar Alliance as well. They did not approve of this at all. A lot of the Greys are actually rogue groups, okay, that are really, there's not really a nice way to say this, but some of them are really a bit of a pain in the ass, okay, because they, think that they can just do what they want because they're not really extraterrestrials. They have the right to still interact on this world in whatever variety or version or timeline that they prefer, but there are certain limitations on what they're being able to do now. But they've already achieved their goal, which is to create a hybrid breakaway civilization, and that is exactly what they've done. When we actually stop killing one another and we actually expand our consciousness to the point where, it's fine for extraterrestrial beings to come and go, to visit whenever they want, and it's safe for them and they feel safe, right? Then certain technologies will be exchanged with humanity. Okay, and some of our technology will also be exchanged with the ETs. Not really the technology, but more like, the works of music and art and maybe some TV shows and stuff like that. Some of the things that we have created, will actually be taken off world as well and shared with the galactic community. So, like music, for example, is such a universal thing. Most civilizations listen to music in their own varieties and they create their own forms of music as well. So, for example, classical music is a super high vibrational kind of music. And, many ET races are already familiar with some of the, geniuses of back in the day, such as Mozart and Beethoven and Bach, for example. They're already aware of these great composers, and many of them already do listen to some of the creations of humanity. So we will be exchanging some of those as well with them. But we'll also become aware of some of the creations of, again, some extraterrestrial beings as well. Technological exchange, can happen, but only if it's safe for it to happen. The Interstellar Alliance are simply not going to let it happen if it's going to, only create more disharmony in our collective consciousness. But another way that technological exchange can happen is not really through technologies itself, but it's also through idea exchange. So, for example, whenever certain scientists on our world have had a eureka moment, okay, where it's just like, oh yeah, of course, and they've invented something. Sometimes, on some occasions, right, they've been helped, they've been sent those thoughts by extraterrestrials who thought, okay, it's time that this race had this piece of technology now. They need this. This is the next step, for example. Some of the technological leaps that we have taken as a civilization over the last 50 years have been nothing short of miraculous. I'm 38 years old. I remember in the 90s when, we just had the Super Nintendo, for example. And now when you look at the technology that is available when it comes to PCs and AI and some of the phones that we've got nowadays and the PlayStation 5s and everything, it's been kind of crazy how quickly the technology is advancing. Okay, and that is again because we are being helped in very subtle ways. Not all human creations are solely human creations. Sometimes we're given the ideas by higher beings, and this doesn't always even include extraterrestrial beings. Sometimes it can include, angelic beings, ascended masters, scientists or inventors on the other side as well, who are still, really emotionally invested in the development of mankind and the collective consciousness as a whole. Like, there's so many ways in which we are being helped. Okay, so there isn't just an extraterrestrial element to this for sure. First contact specialists, right? So a first contact specialist is somebody who has been entrusted with the task by the Interstellar Alliance to slowly prepare a civilization for the arrival of extraterrestrial contact. Okay. One such example of this would be Bashar. Bashar is a channel, um, you know, who is a extraterrestrial being, a hybrid being. He channels through Dalalanka. He's from something like 1,000 years in the future or 700 years, possibly. I can't remember exactly. But he has been trusted to share metaphysical knowledge that can help expand and uplift human consciousness. Okay, so he's really injected a lot of these universal truths and concepts and ideas into the mainstream collective consciousness of humanity. That's been his specific role. And in doing so, he's helping to prepare a lot of us for the coming contact that is to occur over the next few years. Okay. How does that help prepare a civilization for contact, though? It's pretty simple. The gist of Bashar's teachings, for example, is really ultimately to teach us how to release our negative or fear-based belief systems, okay? Because ultimately, it's just the fear that keeps us really fighting against each other. It's the fear that creates all of this disharmony that we are witnessing on our planet. It's the fear of the human condition, the survival brain within us. Okay. We need to learn how to reprogram ourselves in a more holistic way so that we can live more in harmony with one another without these space-time veils creating more and more confusion. So ultimately, the gist of these teachings then is to expand our consciousness by removing these fear-based and limiting belief systems. Okay, and that is such a powerful tool if you know how to do that, if you know how to free your perception of these limiting beliefs, because it just creates naturally more of a desire to be harmonious and to experience more states of oneness with one another. So that's one ways in which, Bashar is actually helping us through that. But first contact specialists can contact us in a variety of ways. We can experience contact with these beings through meditation, through dream experiences, through synchronicity, for example. We can even receive telepathic communication from them or light language transmissions. We can have simple visitations from them externally as well. It just depends on whether the human being that they select to have the contact experience with is ready in their consciousness. Now, I myself have had experience of being visited by a first contact specialist. His name is Ray. He is my future self on the Sirius star system. And I do channel him actually in a lot of my work, believe it or not. That's why I'm known as Ray Ray. Okay. He naturally just channels through me. And I've actually began doing sessions with people now where I tune in and allow him to speak through me. Okay. And what I'm going to do now is get into that state and allow him just to explain a little bit more about his role as a first contact specialist and the ways in which he helps to prepare civilizations for open contact to occur. Okay. So give me a moment. Usually, whenever a first contact specialist, such as myself, decides to contact a human being, it is with another version of themselves. There is a soul contract in place that has been agreed upon by both beings who share the same oversoul collective to work together in harmony, in unison, such as Craig and I have. We assure you that many of you are actually ready for open contact. However, even though we say many, that is still a small percentage of your population, and it would do more harm than good for open contact just to occur tomorrow, for example. Thus, people such as Craig and other spiritual teachers on your world are being given intuitively instructions, guidance, wisdom, tools that they can insert into the mainstream collective consciousness of your world to help prepare those who will struggle with the initial shock of the revelation of our existence, mostly those from religious backgrounds. There will be much upheaval when we actually do arrive. However, that is not what you should be focusing on because you can still observe other people's realities and still not be part of them. Keep focusing on yourself. If people ask for your assistance, your guidance, and support, and of course, offer it to them. But really, the role of a first contact specialist is to also calm your collective nervous system. And of course, there isn't just one, there are many at the moment. And there are many spiritual teachers who are being influenced by first contact specialists who have no idea that they are. They believe that the wisdom and information that is channeled through them is coming simply from themselves or from the divine. And in a sense, it still is coming from the divine, but there is still another factor, and that usually is a first contact specialist. Humanity is a big project that we have been working on since time immemorial, and you are much closer to disclosure than you even believe. So keep on going, keep paving the way, preparing, expanding your consciousness, and most importantly, loving one another. That is the key. I always feel a bit dizzy after that happens, but the energy in the room is completely different now as well. But anyway, first contact specialists, as you can see, are working with us in many ways, many subtle ways. Okay. So if you feel like you have a first contact specialist, which again is an extraterrestrial being who is entrusted with the task of preparing humanity for the arrival of, the extraterrestrial phenomenon that's already here in a sense, then you should be doing work such as this as well. Of course, it will take on a completely different expression. Every expression of the source is completely unique. This is just one of mine. And yeah, humanity needs that. We need more people who are willing to stop caring about looking crazy to other people. Okay. In the sense that, you know, this extraterrestrial like thing is a reality at this point. I know it 1 billion% that it is. So in many years' time, there'll be people who look back and go, "We all thought Ray Ray was crazy, but he was telling the truth the whole time." We need people who don't care about looking crazy to other people. In that sense, of course, I'm not saying be completely bonkers by any stretch, but that's what we need. We need more people to come out, of their intellectual closets and be like, okay, I believe this, and I know this is happening. What can we do to prepare for this spiritually, emotionally, mentally, physically, etc.? So, channeling again can happen in a variety of ways. Yesterday, you saw one way that it can happen when Ray was speaking through me. Yeah. Channeling is something that actually occurs naturally when you're fully in alignment with who you truly are. And again, channeling is also something that is just multifarious in its expression. And we're capable of tapping into and channeling and expressing many levels of dimensional information as well. For example, we can channel our own higher self. We're capable of tapping into and channeling the higher self of other people. If their higher self can't get through to them, they'll use you, to get through to them as like a reflective mirror. We can also channel extraterrestrial beings, as you've already seen. We can channel the ascended masters. We can channel our spirit guides. We can channel our ancestors sometimes who are our relatives in spirit. We can channel collective consciousness of a civilization as well. We can channel the divine itself. We can channel angels. We can channel all sorts of things. Okay. So really, it's just about tapping into the quantum field because in the quantum field, all information already exists. Okay. All information already exists in the quantum field. So once you tap into that level of consciousness, then of course, you have access to basically everything. But of course, it doesn't mean everything will come through you because there are still some things that humanity is simply not allowed to know yet. Okay. It reminds me of like Michael Newton, for example. Michael Newton is he's one of the pioneers actually of past life regression and hypnosis, right? And he actually really focused mostly on his work in the stage between incarnations. He called it LBL, the life between lives. So the astral experiences that we have, between incarnations. Okay, that was his speciality. But during his sessions, he realized as well that, there were many times when he was prevented from knowing certain things. Spirit simply didn't want him to know certain things, because simply, again, we're not ready to know everything. And to be honest, this physical reality experience is full of all of these illusions and limitations. And if we were simply to know everything, what would be the point in coming here? We might as well just stay in spirit. So the point of coming here is to forget certain things so that we can have an experience and rediscover them from a new point of view. So if we're just given all of the information that we want, okay, because that's different than getting the information that you need, then obviously what would be the point in having this experience in the first place? We're here to experience the limitations and to master them. Yeah. So, you know, channeling can occur in many ways. And again, the likes of Bashar and Wendy Kennedy and everything like that are really good examples of first contact specialists who, use the channel and medium in order to get information to or through to humanity as well. If you want to learn how to channel, I also do sessions where I can teach you personally how to get more into that state. I'll give you some pointers now, which really helped me, okay, in my experience of learning how to channel, because first thing I did, I used to began channeling first of all through writing. My writing is completely automatic all the time. I usually have no idea what I'm about to write. It just channels through me automatically all the time now. My galactic messages that I do, everything is completely automatic. I'm not thinking at all. Okay, and that's how you know you're channeling. Now, where that information comes from sometimes is still even a bit of a mystery to me. Sometimes intuitively I'll be told, oh, this is a Pleiadian message or something. Sometimes it's just the wisdom of the source coming in or the collective consciousness of the planet as well. But here's a few pointers that I can give you. First of all, whenever you want to, let's just say you want to write something and you want to channel something, yeah, in writing, the very first thing to make sure you do is not multitask. You've got to give the activity your full and complete concentration, okay? Your attention cannot be divided in any way, shape, or form, okay? You have to be completely in the now. That is the only way to get in the channel and state, because it's only in the now that all information exists. Everything exists in the now. So if your consciousness isn't fully in the now, right, then you are not really going to be able to get in that state and have access to the information that you want access to, basically. Okay. Another thing that I really, believe is important while channeling is to not impress your own ideas onto things. Okay. Now, sometimes whenever we're channeling certain information, it will use the information, like whatever is channeling through you, will use the information that's already in your brain, certain concepts and ideas, things like that. That's normal. But really, I'll give you an example. So when I was writing my novel Blue Orca, right? Like, and I'd do one chapter, like a day later, I'd be like, okay, before I got into the channel and state, I would be like, okay, what direction shall I take this story in now? And on the level of my own mind, my intellect, I would have an idea and be like, maybe I should do this, that, you know. But the moment I sat down at the computer, a completely different idea would just come through me naturally, completely different one. And I would always be mind blown because it would completely connect with everything that has been previously written. And here's another thing about that. I honestly believe sometimes channeling is downloading, okay? Because if Blue Walker, for example, already exists in the future, then, I'm simply downloading it from there. So I don't really need to impress my own ideas on it because that already exists. I simply need to be a conduit through which that can come through. Yeah. So don't impress your own ideas or concepts onto things. That is another very important thing about channeling. Okay. Another thing about channeling is to really only attempt to do it while you're calm. Okay. For example, if you've had a fight with your partner the day before and you haven't resolved it, right, then obviously you're not really going to be able to get in the channeling state. Okay, it's really important that you are calm emotionally, because calmness begets tranquility, and tranquility begets clarity. So you're only going to be able to really be intuitive and be in a channeling state fully when you are calm within emotionally. Because emotions, especially fear-based or negative emotions, distort perception. This is just a fact. So, channeling can only really occur naturally when you are at peace and in harmony with yourself. Okay. So there are a few little pointers. Obviously, there's a lot more. I don't want to go into too much detail over here, but again, if you want to learn how to channel, I can coach you one on one as well. I have done that with a few of my clients for sure, and a lot of them are channeling now as a result of that. What are advanced metaphysics? Just as, physics on our world is still really in its general infancy, okay, in my opinion. So is our understanding of metaphysics and universal laws. Now, a lot of the metaphysical teachings or New Age teachings, are really just variations of a lot of the ancient teachings that we've had before. For example, manifestation is just the law of karma to me. What you put out is what you get back, as Bashar says. It's basically just a reflective tool of your own state of being. Whatever you are radiating out into creation comes back at you, because the creation is nothing but a mirror of your own inner state of consciousness, for sure. But like, when these extraterrestrial beings come down, they're also going to be as teaching as advanced forms of metaphysics. Now, Bashar's metaphysics and a lot of his teachings, especially when it comes to the belief integration that he does, they are advanced forms of psychology and metaphysics for sure, that will be implemented more and more into our society. And the great thing about Bashar's teachings and his form of metaphysics is that they're very simple, and I just think humanity has reached the point in its evolution now, and there's a lot of religious teachings out there and a lot of hogwash that is simply allegorical in nature and really difficult to understand, because the ancients wanted to preserve the integrity of their teachings, and I can completely understand why they would do that. Okay, but we're at a point now where we need simplicity. We need messages to be conveyed to us in a very simple way, you know, because the layman simply can't really get much from the parables of Jesus, because they don't have the spiritual depth or the understanding to decode them. So they're not really going to do anything for them, you know. So it's really important to just be simple in the approach, and this is another great gift that these advanced races are going to be given to unto us for sure. They're going to be given us simple forms of psychology, and they're going to be helping us to really integrate our shadows and our pain, bodies, and everything in a more efficient and simpler way. This again will, expand the consciousness of our civilization and help us to really become more of a coherent society and more of an integrated unit collectively as well. Because a lot of the teachings on our world are creating more harm than good at the moment, and it's not even the teaching's fault. It's just the ignorance of men, you know, often distorts the wisdom in them. Again, let's go back to the teachings of Jesus Christ. Wonderful teacher, one of the greatest teachers that ever lived. Okay. Wonderful ascended master, great example of divine love and compassion. We all love Jesus. How can you not? This, I'm not giving Jesus a bad rap at all here. I've got a picture of him on my altar there. Like, you know, he is everything to me. However, what has happened to his teachings, and this isn't his fault, okay, is that there are so many denominations of Christianity. You know, there are so many denominations of Christianity itself, and this is simply because a lot of his followers do not have the spiritual depth to truly understand his message. His message was actually very simple, okay? His message was simply love one another, go within to connect to the divine, be like a child, do good to those who persecute you. Things of these nature. But why are there so many denominations? Why is there so many variations when the message should be the same? Like let's just simplify everything. Everything should be simplified. The teachings of all the great ones that have gone before us, again, the Jesuses, the Buddhas, the Krishnas, you know, all of these teachers from the past, wonderful teachers, great exemplars of divine love, wisdom, and compassion. Okay. The commonality that they all have with one another, even though they may disagree on surface level, concepts and ideas, whatever, is that they all taught divine love and oneness. That is it. So let's just simplify that by, again, acknowledging the cosmic commonality that we all have with one another. That's how you do that. That is it. All surface level differences do not matter when you actually realize that at our core, we are the same being. And when you hate one being, you are hating yourself. Do unto those as you would have them do unto you. Like Jesus is literally saying, you are one. Love thy neighbor as thyself because they are thyself. Okay. Oneness, our cosmic commonality should be the focal point of all standards of moralistic living in the future, and they will be. Okay. But advanced forms of metaphysics are also going to help us to realize on an experiential level through various forms of meditation as well that we are indeed one. And we are not just one with one another on a human level, but also, you know, in ways that transcends anything you could even imagine. We are one with everything, everything, and this is what true advanced metaphysics teaches. The irony is that the most advanced metaphysics are the most simple, because it just gets to the core central teachings of everything, you know, and like the most profound truths are the most simple. This is why some of the yogis of ancient India are very simple people, you know, and we need more simplicity in our society. And this is another great thing that is happening right now. We are, really getting rid of a lot of the outdated stuff now. We're just like, okay, let's just keep things a bit simple here. Yeah, that's really what it's all about. So, yeah. Now, there are some cases where, a full-scale intervention will occur or could occur, but most likely it won't. But I'm just going to be explaining how it's being conveyed to me, how a full-scale intervention from extraterrestrial beings would occur. For example, if there was a massive virus on the planet that was wiping like 95% of us out, there would be an intervention. Okay. In my opinion, COVID was a scam. Let's be honest, it was a complete scam. A lot of people were tricked into getting the vaccine. I personally didn't get it because I saw through it immediately, but a lot of people were manipulated in getting that jab. And I just pray that, the long-term effects of that vaccine are not going to be too devastating for people. But anyway, if it was like a real virus, okay, then yeah, and it was wiping so many of us out, then they would come down and intervene and help us get rid of it for sure. Again, if we were on the brink of nuclear destruction, they would just simply stop the missiles before they were able to, detonate. They can change the launch codes on them anytime they want. Basically, they have them in their control. And that just shows as well, like one thing I want to say is like how do people think that these beings are a threat? Like, of course they're a threat in their capabilities. They have technology that is 10,000 years ahead of ours, but they've never used it. They could literally destroy our world within a blink of an eye if they wanted to, but they never have. They've never shown any malice at all. They've actually showed a lot of control because with great power comes great responsibility. But they've showed us time and time again that they are simply here to help us evolve. That's it. That's all they want. They want us to evolve. They want us to be able to interact with them and be part of their council and to really, join them in a real celebration of unity, throughout the galaxy. And that is a wonderful thing for sure. Full open contact is going to occur for sure within our lifetimes. It is coming, okay? And in the coming years, there is going to be more and more opportunities for humanity to really come closer and grow together, despite, again, all of these surface level differences. Another way that full scale intervention would occur would be, for example, the sun was going to go supernova. They would take many of us off world to different planets so that, human culture would survive. But obviously, that's not going to happen for like 5 billion years either. Obviously, another one would be if a massive meteor was going to hit the Earth, they would wipe it out. They wouldn't come to us, but they would destroy the meteor. They would prevent it from hitting us as well. That's what I've been told. There is one that is coming in 2036 called Apophis, and I think it has like a 3% chance of hitting us, but it will not hit us, I've been told. It will not hit us, so we don't need to worry about that one at all. But even if it was going to hit us with like a 90% chance, they would intervene anyway. We are protected, we are guarded, as long as we don't, keep on detonating all of these nuclear bombs and atom bombs that are also seeping into other dimensions and affecting beings who live there, then we won't be a problem to them. Most importantly, we won't be a problem to ourselves because we are literally shooting ourselves in the foot at the moment, you know, by just the way that we're behaving towards one another. Ultimately, in my personal opinion, what creates most of the separation that we are experiencing collectively is the cognitive dissonance. Okay, people have the attachment to their belief systems. Everyone believes that, things should be done a certain way. And I understand that we're all individuals. We all have our own unique perception and perspective of truth and everything like that. But we can agree to disagree respectfully. Why do we have to go and blow somebody up who doesn't believe in the same God as us? Why do we have to do that? Where does that come from? That makes no sense. That is cognitive dissonance, and this is something that needs healing before full open contact can actually occur. It is the cognitive dissonance that is being perpetuated by the various religious and spiritual belief systems on our planet that is causing most of the harm in our world. And of course, again, corporate greed as well and other things. But ultimately, it's that, you know, you've got something like, a small percentage of the people on our world who are hoarding like 95% of the wealth. Like, this is ridiculous. If we were truly ready for full open contact, there would be no one starving, there would be nobody homeless, everybody would just be having, living a very comfortable life. The earth is big enough to take care of everybody. It's just that we've got too many people in the world who are interested in hoarding, basically, as much as they possibly can because they're constantly living in survival. And again, this is where the experiences with first contact specialists comes in, the channeling, the advanced metaphysics, all that is really to help switch the survival centers off in our brain, which can enable us then to experience more state of oneness and universal harmony with each other. Because when we're not living in fear, we're not going to be motivated to want to hoard all the money, for example. That just doesn't happen. You'd be more motivated to just want to share and take care of those who are less fortunate than yourself. So we need to see more of this collectively. We need more of this in our collective now. So that's it, guys. That is it for week 3. I will see you next week with week 4. I hope you found this course informative thus far, and all the best for the coming week. Joy to you.